Block Island Times. We ready to go?
Yep, I'm starting to with recording.
And I'll go ahead and admit everybody. As soon as Ken's back in his seat. And Amy, let's mute ourselves, okay?
I'm starting to with recording.
All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. Wednesday, May 27th, Block Island New Shore Town Council meeting. New Shore Town Council is meeting via telecommunications pursuant to the State of Rhode Island Executive Order 2025, which was dated April 15th, 2020, and has been updated by the governor. I'll make a note this evening that we have as participants who can actually take part in the meeting. Myself, Second Warden Andre Boudreau, Councilman Chris Willey, Councilman Sven Reesum, Councilwoman Martha Ball. We have Interim Town Manager Jim Kern with us. We have Town Solicitor Catherine Marola, Finance Director Amy Lewis, EMA Directors Bill McComb, Peter Gemp, and I believe Chief Vin Carlone is with us. If not, he will be joining us. Also with us this evening will be Medical Director Dr. Tom Workup from the Medical Center. There again, the meeting will be, a copy of the meeting will be posted to the town's website after we adjourn. It'll be on new-shoreham.com. The agenda is now on the town's website via Clerkbase. Under the agendas for town council, you'll find the agenda there and any pertinent copies of information with it. First item on the agenda will be Warden's report. I'll keep it short and sweet. Basically, we had a extremely quiet, uneventful, relatively weekend, Memorial Day weekend. Kate, is that you? Kate, is that your radio? All right. And we had a quiet weekend. Not a lot of folks coming out, obviously, partially because of the weather, partially because of the coronavirus situation. In a way, it was disappointing for some in terms of the business, but a relief for some of us in terms of what it might have been. So we'll move on and see how we do for the rest of the summer. First item on the agenda. Andre, do you have anything you want to report as warden?
No, thank you.
Okay. First item on the agenda would be receive and act on a resolution honoring Block Island School class of 2020 graduates. I don't believe we have a resolution for this evening, but I would like to make a motion to designate the week of June 8th as Block Island School class of 2020 graduate week. And I believe I would like to invite them to our meeting. One of our meetings that will be held that week. We'll announce which one to make that motion.
Second.
Second by Andre Boudreau, father of one of the graduates. Like I said, we will have a special meeting for them and an item on the agenda to address them that one of those nights. But I would suggest that anyone seeing them for that week, if you see them and you know they're a graduate, definitely congratulate them because they certainly won't. It's certainly a year to remember. It's not a graduation as all have past been. So, any discussion on that?
Yeah, Ken, I just want to add to what you just said. That'd be great. Thank you so much. Today, as many of you know, the graduates went to the Atlantic and collected their diplomas for video. It was, I think it was a wonderful event. As I said, it'll be on video. And during that week of June 8th through 12th, not only will the newspaper be covering each of the seniors will be having a senior dinner. And then on Sunday, June 14th at 1, there'll be a Zoom virtual ceremony with the awards and whatnot. And then a live showing of the video of the graduates that they recorded today. The graduates, I can tell you, seem fine. with all this. They've been very busy at this point. Thinking of other things, I don't think it's just putting a lot, everything, there's a lot on their plates. But I think for the most part, the parents are suffering a lot more than the kids are right now. So if you see a parent of a Block Island School senior, be nice to them these days.
Thank you, Andre. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Andre?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Ben?
Aye.
Martha?
Aye.
I vote in the affirmative. Motion carries 5-0. Congratulations again, seniors. Look forward to seeing you on next week at some point, or the week of the 8th. Next item on the agenda is receive a report of town manager, which I'm sure will cover many different things. Jim Kern, are you there?
I am.
Great.
Thank you. I do have a list. I'll try to move through it pretty quickly. We have a good amount on the agenda tonight. First is the cable reburial project. This is for those who don't know the requirement of Ørsted, which is the follow-on business entity from Deepwater Wind, to dig up the original cable that has uncovered and use some different technology to bury the two cables out to some distance off the shore, adjacent to the town beach, and then pull the cables up, disconnect the old cable, and connect the new cables. That construction is anticipated to occur October 2020, so 5 months from now, to essentially 12 months from now, next spring in 2021. The effort up until now has been that the town solicitor, the facilities manager, the first warden, and myself interacting with the representatives of National Grid. I failed to mention they were the other company. We've engaged the services of an appraiser. That appraiser is going through the process of identifying the value of what is in essence going to be four documents, two documents that allow those two companies to work temporarily, and then two documents that are easements that would be referred to as permanent, that allow them to use to access the cable in the out years. So process of identifying the value of those two, the kind of market value of those, of that land. And then there are a couple of other things, possibly a pre-staging license, but that's small in comparison to the other two. And then working with other entities in town, identifying the value of what I would call the interruption when the cables are cut, and reconnected. So town solicitor has drafted the easement, one series of the easements, which is the one with Deepwater Wind. And so the schedule as we anticipate it going is that we schedule a closed session or a series of closed session discussions with the council to identify, to receive the work of the appraiser and the calculations relative to the other values, so that we can identify the town's position relative to the consideration of those easements, and then complete the negotiation with the two entities, National Grid and Ørsted, and put them in a position to continue and complete their permitting, CRMC, and other regulators, such that they can begin construction, as I said, next October. So I'll a lot of work associated with each little step, but it's moving along. But we will need the work of the council within the next month. Really, we're looking to probably finalize the process as I just described it by the end of June. Thomas Property House, talking to Sam Bird, the facilities manager. The company doing the renovation has started work again. He has 4 crews coming out within the next week, and the anticipated completion there is 3 weeks out from today. West Side Sidewalk, I talked with the town's engineering consultant today, Jim Jeremia, and he indicated a restart there of June 8th. So a week from Monday, surveyor to be out within the next day or two, and a relatively short, although somewhat unknown, but relatively short number of weeks to complete that project, at least up to the finish stage. Most annual contracts have been renewed. We are rebidding cleaning and janitorial to add some of the CDC and Rhode Island Department of Health guidelines so that we can update and include those. I'll put together a list with the status of some of those contracts and also some of the projects like Andy's Way and Gracie's Cove. I would also mention that the Rhode Island Airport Corporation conversations that were going on before the government shutdown are somewhat on hold for now, and I'll update as those open up again. Assistant to the Harbor Master was posted about 4 or 5 working days ago, so that we anticipate that posting being finished and filling that position. Harbor Master reports that the harbor operation is going well. I should include in that annual contracts discussion, dredging of Old Harbor is scheduled for this spring also. Haven't talked with them on Talking New London Ferries in probably a week. And when I did, they were looking at 2nd or 3rd week of June for returning to service, most likely weekends first. I did want to mention for everyone that the wastewater committee and director are testing for any presence of the virus in the wastewater stream, kind of a random sample approach, and they've done 2 or 3 and have found no trace. Got the most recent one today. Bathrooms, we did open them this weekend, as I think people know. As Ken mentioned, kind of a slow weekend. I also checked in with police department and others kind of to get a sense of how things were going. Went down and talked to Cindy Lasser. She said the bathrooms went very well. Wasn't particularly a difficult first week to test them under, but it went well, and we anticipate those bathrooms being open at least on the weekends. And I need to circle back with some people to discuss whether we do it during the week. A couple more things. I had a number of conversations with the Recreation Director, Dave Sniffen. He is scheduling a discussion with his board, the Recreation Board, to discuss a number of things, including the beach, his summer camps, some other things. We believe that opening the beach is one of the potentially positive things for this community if we're able to do it correctly. He is staffed at the point where we're ready to go, has done work on signage, kind of identifying how people get in and out of the beach. We've got a lot of conversations about access to bathrooms, et cetera, spacing. He's been on a number of calls with other state entities and town entities, similar to we're going to talk to Amy Land, the finance director, in a couple of minutes. There's been a lot of discussion with other communities and benefiting from other people's experience. In the case of the beach, mostly so that beaches open up concurrently and you don't have people overwhelming one beach. He did say that underneath the guidance, he did believe that Camp Mohegan would be able to operate. There would be restrictions to 15 in a group, and that group would stay the same. That sets up pretty well for Block Island. He says his max is usually about 20, different for some other communities. So we're fortunate in that way. And lastly, I would mention that union negotiations and kind of discussions with employees in general relative to salaries and pay and how we're going to proceed. I've been holding off until we get a little bit clearer idea of where the budget schedule is going to be, and we're going to talk about that in the next couple items. And so when we could expect to be able to have a meaningful conversation, but that should start. Without getting too far ahead of ourselves, anytime you're in a circumstance where you have significant budget challenges, things like vacancies, furloughs, deferrals are all part of the discussion. We haven't obviously made any decisions yet, but I do anticipate having some preliminary conversations with people over the next coming weeks, just so we can start to prepare. Obviously, that runs concurrent with the discussions about the budget at large. But I think most people know the primary expense of any municipality is paying people and benefits, and so that's going to be a big part of managing the budget. Not so much out of this year, as Amy covered last meeting, but into fiscal 2021. I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim. That pretty much covers all the questions I had. I'll move on. First, the next item on the agenda, I'll just make note of some of the items you mentioned, Jim. As you know, Andre and yourself and I have been in conversations on a daily basis with the governors and governor's office and also municipal leaders. I was on another one this afternoon, but some of the information I have will come under a later agenda item, so I won't bring it up now, but I'll have that available later.
Okay.
Yeah.
A quick question,
Jim, go ahead.
Jim, on the beach house, I heard some different rumors. Can you help with the status of concessions or food at the beach house and what's going on?
So
Or do we know?
I did have that in my notes. That's a little bit of a work in progress, but I had a conversation with Sam Bird and Attorney Marola today, trying to fashion, and Sam has been in contact with our, I'll say, I don't know, long time, but our current, I will say, concession vendor, as I think people can appreciate, a bit difficult to enter into what might be a normal negotiation or a normal competing or bidding of that process, and then identifying a rent amount. So we're going to have some conversations, or we're going to continue conversations and try to fashion a reasonable amount of money that might represent a rent from the person running the concessions, the company running the concessions. We would like to open the concessions if we can reach an agreement, and obviously that agreement would go through the council, and would likely go through the beach commission first, or the recreation commission first, or with input. But that's a conversation that hasn't consummated completely, but that's kind of the objective as it stands now. If we can't, I think some of the conversations we've had is to augment that site with a food truck or food trucks, or if neither of those are feasible, then the beach pavilion does without for this summer.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Any other questions?
Yeah, this is Martha.
Go ahead, Martha.
Hi, Jim, you mentioned the Andes Way project. And I just want to be sure that we're all on the same page regarding the appropriate signage down there when that ultimately gets done. Some decisions have to be made, and it does belong to the town. I want to be sure we all keep that in mind. Do you all know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
Any questions or follow up on that? Chris Willie, go ahead.
Just back, a question for Jim. What was the sidewalk project completion roughly? Was it the end of June? I don't remember. You said begins June 6th, but I thought it was 3 weeks. Do you know, you have a rough idea, barring no complications?
June 8th was the date that Jim gave me. They didn't give him a date or a time period, but what he and I have discussed in the past was 2, 3, 4 weeks, something in that area.
Thank you.
Chris, originally when they started, from the time they started, they were thinking, I think their original drop dead date was the middle of June. They were thinking they were probably going to be finished by the middle or the end of May, but obviously things are off because of the delay. So,
Yeah, we obviously don't want it to go into July, but if it does, it does. There's nothing we could do about it.
yeah,
So,
that's it, basically.
I think there's a reasonable chance that it doesn't.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Ken, one last one. Jim, you mentioned that Thomas House is going to be finished before the end of June. So the new town manager should be able to move in there mid-July or July. That's all set. And then what's the status of furniture?
That's not a conversation. We haven't had the kind of the resolution of that discussion. I had some preliminary ones with Ken months ago, but that's something that still needs to be determined.
Okay, thank you.
Just a reminder for everyone, if you're taking part in the meeting, wait until I recognize you before you start speaking, so those who are listening know who's talking. Thank you.
Ken?
Martha, go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't get a confirmation, and this is how things fall through the cracks, that the town will be overseeing the ultimate signage at Andy's Way.
I'm fine with that, Martha.
I'm fine with that, Martha. This is Sven, and I think it's town property, so it should be approved.
It is town property. I just want to be sure that's understood, because it shouldn't look that way when you go down there. And I want to be sure this doesn't, we've let things slide in the past. I don't want it to happen again.
No more sliding.
Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. Thank you, Jim.
Ken, it's Andre. You were talking about municipal lead or something before you were, you went on. I'm just trying to bring you back on.
No, I said that there's items on the agenda today that would be coming up during our discussion of the amended emergency ordinance later.
Oh, okay. I didn't know you were finished with that train of thought.
Yep. So, next item on the agenda is discuss timetable for budget work sessions. We did have something pop up in our boxes. You all should have a copy of it at this point. Labeled fiscal year 2021 budget review schedule revised. Jim, do you want to touch on this?
I'll quickly kick it to Finance Director Amy Land. This schedule she put together, kind of a resuscitation of the schedule that we're rolling into, that we had originally laid out through the spring before we reached a number of other priorities to deal with. And I'll let her walk through in whatever detail the council needs her proposed budget schedule. And then following the item after that is a document that she put together identifying, based not only on her own thinking, but a number of other communities, how best to allow public participation in those work sessions and budget public hearing.
Okay, Jim, thank you. Amy?
Sure. As we discussed last week, it's time to resume the work on the fiscal 21 budget. What I'm proposing here is essentially to reserve Mondays in June for that purpose. I know that you are all very, very busy, but I don't believe that we can defer this conversation too much longer, particularly in that there is guidance now about how communities may hold financial town meetings. I'm not necessarily prepared to talk about that for us today. We'll probably be back next week with that, but knowing that we can get to that point makes it even more critical that we not delay. We need to have these preparatory discussions first. On the schedule in front of you, we did have one work session where we did an overview of the budget and had an introduction from the school. So I would suggest we start where we left off and do a review on that first Monday, June 8th, of the 21 budget that we presented, and then move into what some of the recommended changes are, so that you can prepare visually. I actually imagine an amended budget document that has your original 21 proposed budget with recommendations already for what needs to change. We know there will be significant adjustments to revenue. There may be some open questions about how we align revenues and expenses as we go through the process, but we'll start with a little bit of a high level and then move into, as we traditionally do, some of the department level detail. Looking at this, it is a fairly aggressive schedule. I know that because there's a balance between moving forward and how much adjustment we're actually going to be able to make this year. There's a lot of uncertainty. It's probably not a year we're going to talk about huge new initiatives. We were already very constrained in terms of dollars. That has only gotten more intense. So I actually don't know that there will be a lot of very detailed discussion that sometimes some years we can get into. But we can always make additional room in the schedule if we need to. So after that first overview and department level review, then I would come back to some of the community support items in our second meeting, June 15th. Health services, fire rescue, early learning center, possibly back to the school if we need to. I expect that will be a carry forward discussion as their numbers change as well. And those would be work sessions. If we needed to, we could carry that work session approach over to the 22nd, but and then move into the public hearing. But you'll see two dates there laid out for a potential public hearing. And that is so that we have plenty of opportunity for the public to engage. This is a new platform for all of us. And so making sure we have that public participation, I think, is really important. When we get to hearing from the public, holding that hearing open for 2 meetings to make sure that anyone whose technology may have gotten in the way, things like that, can still speak, I think is really important, which is why you're seeing that public hearing over 2 dates. The schedule in front of you is obviously abbreviated. It does not have a financial town meeting date on there yet. As I said, that guidance on how we may hold one has just been issued this morning. So we're still working through the specifics to make sure that we understand that we can meet that criteria and what kind of time frame we might need for that. But ideally, if we were to stick to this schedule, we may be looking at early to mid-July to hold that financial meeting, which means we're not too far into the next year. We don't lose a lot of time before we have that adopted budget.
Thank you.
Questions, concerns?
Ben Reesum?
Amy, how are some of the department budgets being discussed, rolled up, or what's the process and how's that been adjusted?
So far, it's been work mostly on my end with the town manager, but I am going to start reaching out to them basically this week and next week to make sure that we're all on the same page about what can move, what can't, and what the priorities are. But they will have been wrapped into those conversations by the time it gets to the council.
Thank you.
Amy, any expenses that are aligned with the COVID-19 crisis, have those been have you taken those into account, and will those be reflected in the budget?
They will. For us right now, those are not big expenditures.
Right.
And honestly, we hope that they wouldn't be. We are still trying to recover any expenditures that we are making, but it's really a revenue loss conversation.
Right.
And we're going to continue to push that. But I think, as those of you who have been in some of these leadership calls know, there's not a lot of resolution about whether that revenue recovery will trickle down to the municipalities or not. So I think we have to assume that they won't for planning purposes. And if we're able to recover anything, that's great. It moves us faster through our recovery.
Okay. Chris Willie?
Amy, can we, I guess more on what Sven asked, but as far as department by department, will we be able to, or can you focus our discussions on the major changes and requests, or what's been deleted or what's been postponed, so we can expedite the discussion, so to speak, and focus on what we really need to focus on?
Absolutely.
Particularly when it comes to the departments, and then the revenue, as we all know, is going to be a big one. I'd like to see us all really just focus on the task at hand and get it done, so we can get the public involved to the best of our ability. Thank you.
Other questions or concerns? So what you proposed here is to have our Mondays dedicated to the budget, at least through the third week of June, fourth week of June. Ordinarily, we would have one Monday meeting and then a Wednesday work session and then another Wednesday regular meeting. So this would only basically interrupt. This would basically only interrupt one of our meetings, right? One of our Monday meetings. Oh no, Monday's the 1st of June. We can have a Monday meeting. Okay, so it doesn't. All right. Does the council have any concerns about having the Monday meetings that are proposed at 6 o'clock? Comments?
I do not have any problem with that, Ken.
Okay. I see a thumbs up from Sven. Martha?
It's fine.
Okay. Chris? Good. Okay. All right. Amy, sounds like a great proposal and one we're going to be working with. So thank you for your effort to put it together.
Sure. And everyone is comfortable with 6 o'clock. That's more of a suggestion, but it does leave a little more time if those nights run long.
I'm sure Andre will like that, right, Andre?
Perfect.
I
As
know.
long as Ken has his supper.
Well, no, that's fine. It's better. You're right. It's better to start earlier and get it over with. So sounds good.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Amy. So next item on the agenda will be, actually, do you want to, I'll make a motion to adapt the budget review schedule as proposed by the finance director for meetings, for budget work session meetings on Monday, June 8th and Monday, June 15th. And then a budget public hearing for Monday, June 22nd, and a possible public hearing warrant adoption on Wednesday, June 24th, as presented.
I'll second.
Seconded by Andre. All those in favor, Andre?
Aye.
Councilman Willie?
Aye.
Ben Riesum?
Aye.
Martha?
Aye.
I vote in the affirmative. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is discuss the approach for public participation in budget work sessions and public hearing. Jim, did you want to start this one also, or?
I'll just remind what we're going into. This is a proposal that Amy has worked considerably on, and as I said, in my conversations with her, we've also shared it with the town clerk. It is also drawn from conversations that she participates in with leadership, financial leadership in other communities. and is informed by the schedule she just described, where we have just recently, the financial people have just recently received more clarity with respect to how we might be able to do financial town meeting, which is, and a good amount of that has changed just since last week. And so I think, as Amy will describe, her priorities here were the greatest level of participation with the greatest level of reliability. And so I'll let her take it from there.
Thank you, Jim. Amy?
Sure, and the focus here is really on the budget work sessions and the public hearing. We'll tackle financial town meetings separately. But as Jim says, what's important about this approach is that it builds on the existing Zoom platform as we're currently using it, so that the learning curve for the council, for the people working the back end, and for the users should be pretty straightforward. In terms of listening, everything stays the same. People can observe the meeting by calling in through Zoom or by streaming on YouTube. What we're adding is the speaking component, and to keep this most equitable and create access that's comparable across all the users, we're going to request that people who do wish to comment or ask a question participate telephonically. And for those who dial in now, or at the time, the method for doing that, or raising your hand, identifying yourself as having a question or a comment, is to use the *9 feature. And the hosts then in the background will be able to identify that individual as having raised their hand and cue them to be called on by the first warden to make their comments. In order to do that, we're going to ask people in instructions that will be published prior to the meeting. These are not the instructions, but more the high level. Ask people to register in advance so that we have their phone numbers, so that we can match their name and their number together. It makes it that much easier to call on people, to identify people, and to keep their phone numbers private. We might, I don't want to say limit discussion, but sort of like a financial town meeting where we have slightly more formal rules for speaking, as opposed to the in-person public budget work sessions that we traditionally do. We do limit people to speak once on a topic. We would likely do something like that as well. We may not have the same time constraints that we put on a comment at financial town meeting. But in order for everyone to be recognized, I think that would be an important component. And people can continue to comment to the council and through the clerk in writing, either in advance of the meeting, by email, by letter, or in real time as well with an email to the clerk or the designated email address that we've provided in the instructions. So it's not super fancy. We're not talking about having the public engaged in the Zoom videos at this point. I think it's too much for this community to digest in this time frame that we're looking at. Hopefully, again, we may get there eventually, but it does create a platform where the public can participate, and hopefully we have as few technology barriers as possible. For anyone who doesn't know, there is now a toll-free number for people to call in to these meetings, so that, again, there's one less barrier to people participating in these public hearings. Obviously, we have two different types of meetings that happen in the budget process. One is the work sessions. Those tend to be more focused on the council, the manager, the finance director, and the departments or the organizations that are presenting at the moment. We will still be able to have that dialogue. Department heads will be available by phone. Again, we're going to ask them to register early so that we can identify them and have them available to call on. Same thing with fire, rescue, health services, identifying their representative who's available to speak and having them in the meeting just as we normally would. When you get to the public hearing, that's much more of the public's space. And so it might take a little more patience, a little more understanding. But again, using that telephonic raise hand feature of the *9 should allow everyone to participate and have their voices heard. I have a couple questions, a couple decisions to make for the council to make along the way, but why don't I stop there and see if people have questions or concerns?
Andre?
Thanks, Ken. Amy, I'm wondering, I think I got what you said down. And I think it's a great plan for participation. But I'm wondering if, and I may be wrong, but will department heads be participating through telephone or through Zoom?
They'll be participating by telephone. And so even using that mechanism, they'll be available to answer questions. Because even this approach requires a lot more administration in the background. We know that there's a lot of back end work that goes into holding these meetings. And so the hosts behind the meeting will be able to see them, unmute them for their portion of the discussion.
So personally, if it's possible, I would feel more comfortable seeing them, speaking to them. If they could, the department head could actually be in on the Zoom and be like one more person, like at a time. I don't know how that could be done, but that's just my input on that. And I appreciate, that being considered.
I have a question, Martha.
Martha, go ahead. Andre, were you done?
I'm all done
Thank you. Martha, go ahead. I see you spend, hold on.
for years.
At what point do we anticipate the counts? How many, the number is supposed to go up to 15, is that right, on gatherings? Hello?
Yeah, go ahead. What's the question, Martha?
The question, well, first of all, a clarification that I think the number that if the numbers get changed on gathering, it's going to be up to 15. And is that going to enable us and Amy to be in the same room?
I can't answer that.
That's a fair question. We may be to the point where, if I can answer, Ken,
Go ahead. Go ahead, Jim.
we may be at the point where the council would consider going that way, as long as they were comfortable, with spacing in the room and the like, if they felt it was. But you still got to set up a Zoom apparatus for the rest of the participants. So I'm not quite sure how much you gained. It's not the same as putting one camera on all 5 of you interacting that way. So we'd have to think.
I see your hand, Chris. Sven, go ahead.
Amy, just to make sure I caught it, first of all, I like the plan. Thank you for putting it all together. Is the phone participation by the department head similar in nature to how Martha has been using her phone and participating and is able to contribute, or is it different? Just trying to get a bearing.
No, it would be exactly the way that Martha currently participates.
Thank you, because that clarifies, and thank you.
Chris Willie?
I believe June 1st, the group total for people congregating is 15 people.
It's
So,
supposed to be.
That opens up, I think, a few more avenues, particularly to have these meetings. So we should explore those. That's specific to Andre's point about being able to meet with department heads. I think we can get pretty creative. They don't all have to be in the room at the same time. So, and our public participation can certainly still be by phone. So anyway, as this moves forward, just keep that in mind. Things change on June 1, so that might assist us in this process.
Amy, go
Things
ahead.
are supposed, it's Martha. Things are supposed to change June 1. They were supposed to change the 22nd. I just really want to make it really clear that if everything goes the way it's supposed to go, things change June 1
Thank you, Martha.
or June 2nd, for all intents and purposes.
Amy, go ahead.
Sure. I think we all hope and maybe expect that that's what's going to happen. My concern, and I think there's room to amend this approach whenever that opportunity arises. My fear is that the town, or my concern is that the town doesn't currently have a plan to lay that out. And so I don't want to hold up moving forward in the work that we need to do while we make one. So I'm happy to amend this as the opportunity arises, but I don't want to put it on hold.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Sven?
Nope, I'm good. I don't know that we have to, do we have to adopt this as a policy or can we just move ahead? It's a question of process.
I think we can just move ahead with it as far as,
I'm good.
yeah. Amy, go ahead.
I do have a small nuance that I think it'd be helpful if the council ironed out ahead of time, which is in the budget work sessions, which are more council manager, finance director, department focused. Is it a priority of the council to carve out space for public participation? That could look like a time for public hand raising at the end of each department or at the end of the evening, or hold all of that public input until the public hearing. I just think knowing that in advance will help everyone prepare for those meetings.
Personally, it seems to me that historically that kind of input has been helpful to have in the process. And we don't want to get all the way through and then have something pop up and things might have changed a lot sooner. So I would lean towards having, like you said, having an input at the end of each department discussion to just get things laid out and get things scratched and figured out what's going on and how everybody feels about it sooner than later. So that's my opinion. Anyone else?
I agree with Ken. I agree.
Go ahead. You do?
I
Okay.
agree.
I agree with you, Ken. Yes.
Okay. Sven, do you have a? Okay. So Amy,
Thank you. That's helpful as we put together some more formal guidelines for participation.
Right.
We can incorporate that concept.
okay. Anything further on that? Okay.
I don't have anything.
What? Amy?
I don't have anything.
Okay, good. All right, thank you. Then the next item on the agenda will be to discuss an act on adopting emergency order of the town of New Shoreham pertaining to financial matters. Amy?
Sure. This is the ordinance that you saw and we discussed last week. We just wanted to give a little room and space for people to digest it. If there are any follow-up questions, I'm happy to take them. The purpose, again, of the ordinance is to continue some of those important authorizations for the town to issue tax anticipation notes, revenue anticipation notes, refund bonds, place investments, expend grant funds, some pretty basic financial functions whose authority comes through the warrant process.
So would this become moot if the financial town meeting, if and when the financial town meeting is held, or does this just roll into the same warrant?
The wording of the ordinance actually says that it remains in place until such time as a legal financial town meeting may be held, at which point the voters may extend the authority or they may rescind it.
Sorry, I didn't do my homework. Thank you. Okay. Are there comments or questions on it? All right. I'll make a motion to,
Excuse me, Ken.
yes, Kathy Marola, go ahead.
Yeah, I need a motion under 409B of the town charter to adopt this ordinance in accordance with the emergency provisions of the charter.
I'll make a motion under town charter for, town ordinance 409B to amend the emergency ordinance.
Second.
Seconded by,
Andre.
thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor, Andre?
Aye.
Ben?
Aye.
Chris Willie?
Aye.
Martha?
Aye.
I vote in the affirmative. Motion carries 5-0. Catherine, now that we've done that, I go ahead and make the motion to adopt the ordinance.
Yes.
All right, thank you. I'll make a motion to adopt the emergency order of the town of New Shoreham pertaining to financial matters. That will be dated May 27th, 2020, as presented.
Second.
Seconded by Andre. All those in favor, Andre?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Ben?
Aye.
Martha?
Aye.
I vote in the affirmative. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you, Amy.
Put this
Yeah.
together. Next item on the agenda is what's become a perfunctory at these meetings ever since being in the middle of March, is to discuss and act on the amendment to the amended emergency ordinance of the town of New Shoreham, April 15th, 2020, including but not limited to changes in work activities. This basically encompasses the emergency ordinance of the town. And I think the first thing I want to bring up is that over the weekend, the deputy director for the governor, Nicole Verdi, called me and was concerned because the governor's staff is putting together updated regulations for the state relative to reopening phase 2. And they were concerned because, as she described to me, many of the businesses, most of the businesses they've contacted on the mainland have help that is going to be living locally. Any out of country or imported help from other parts of the country that they will be bringing in, they're not necessarily doing that this year. So they're not going to have a problem with international workers and communal housing the way Block Island is, they feel. So she reached out to me to find out from us what our plan was, and indicated that they would like to see the island come up with a resolution of this potential problem on a local basis. The governor has supported our efforts up to now to be more restrictive than her ordinances, because she realizes that there are certain situations in resort communities, particularly Block Island, that have to be dealt with differently than on the mainland. So they would support very much the island having regulations in place to deal with potential problems with employee housing that aren't necessarily pertinent to those situations on the mainland. She was in contact also with Tom Workup. And Tom, I'd like to invite you to maybe weigh in on this, if you would, briefly.
Sure, thank you. We did. She reached out to me on Saturday, and since then we've had 3 very productive meetings with the DOH, including the Deputy Chief of Staff, Nicole Verdi that you mentioned, Margaret Grady, and Seema Bixit, who is the Director of Environmental Health in DOH. And then again at 5 o'clock today, we had another meeting that we kind of agreed on how they can assist us further with materialistic support, understanding on how they would assist us in contact tracing, and then how the state may help be more proactive with social messaging on the mainland prior to people traveling to Block Island. But it did get down to the crux of what is the isolation plan if there is a worker that is COVID positive. We went through the process that we've talked about here in the town council meeting, and they were generally very appreciative of the plans that the town has done thus far. And I communicated with them that it was our intention that the businesses would develop an isolation plan, that we were happy to assist in reviewing it. But as of today, I did have a nice meeting with one of our business owners that had a phenomenally good plan. And I think if the other plans look anything close to what they had developed is going to be quite adequate.
Tom, would you agree that what the governor's office is looking for is the town to adopt, and as part of our amended emergency ordinance, is for the town to adopt a requirement for each businesses to have their plan reviewed by yourself?
I would think that's an accurate statement.
Okay. Questions or concerns? Andre Boudreau?
Thanks, Ken. Thanks, Tom. So how would the town council go about this? A resolution in a resolution, or a motion, or a,
I think it would be an amendment to the ordinance.
and would this would be a requirement of the businesses with seasonal housings, with, conjugal, housing situations, or, oh, wait a minute, that's not the right word. I'm sorry. Congregate housing. How would, well, on Block Island, it's probably the same thing. So how do we make sure that this is done? Like, what's the mechanism to get this done?
Tom, do you have a suggestion?
So far, we've just received phone calls from the various business owners, and we communicate back with them about their particular plan. So that's acceptable to me. I'm certainly available to the town council if you want to set up a larger group meeting. I'm at your disposal.
Sven Riesum?
Yeah, one way to do this, and I don't necessarily like the require, but the strong recommendation or suggestion is on the minimum housing license, which has been held off until June 1st, right? When they get that, we could have a piece of paper, some way to attach something in there that would say, here's a strong, well, we can figure out how to word it, but a strong recommendation or requirement that they present the plan to Dr. Warkup and talk about it, and have designated quarantine space, process, protocols, everything Dr. Warkup just mentioned. And that can be the vehicle to make sure, whether it's a check the box or it's an attachment to the license, that to make sure that, one, it's known about, and two, they have agreed to support the town and the medical center in this COVID effort.
Chris Willie?
The state wants us to submit a resolution, that's fine. And the plan Sven mentioned with maybe approval from Dr. Warkup is also fine. A lot of these businesses submitted a lot of their ideas 4 weeks ago with the questionnaire, or 3 weeks ago with that business questionnaire that went out. So a lot of these businesses are already prepared to for this. Can we have a better definition of congregate housing, though? What is it? And we have to, most of the businesses out here hire seasonal help. Some of them live in apartments, some of them live in group housing situations, some don't. Some just have, a bedroom somewhere. What are we using as the definition? I think we really have to be on point with that. And then we can include it in the resolution.
Tom, do you have I'm sorry. Someone else?
I would say that's a good question, actually. And I guess a broad definition would be 2 or more people living in a dwelling that isn't without the ability to socially isolate. So I guess if you had 2 people in a 2-bedroom apartment, they would be able to isolate much like a regular home. But I guess whatever definition that would include 2 more people in a dwelling that are not able to do that. So 2 people in a room, 4 people in a 2-bedroom apartment, I think would qualify at a basic level.
Okay.
I think as far as the resolution goes, I think if we I'm not sure if we make it a resolution, but if we just amend the, like I said, as one amendment to the emergency ordinance, which we may have more tonight we want to discuss, we just amend the emergency ordinance to include however we want to do it. Martha, did you have something?
Yeah, I do. If the governor's office and upstate is willing to support this, why are we not requiring it? It just seems like kind of a no-brainer to me. And if if everybody has a plan in place, or has some kind of plan in place, then it shouldn't be that difficult. And I think everybody must,
certainly
because nobody wants nobody wants their business to be the one that goes south.
Certainly seems like it would benefit the businesses to have the doctor review it so that their plan, whatever it is, would be cost effective and would not be shooting themselves in the foot to be doing it. So I think as a requirement, I think we have it as you said, as part of the rooming house license application or license or whatever, that it be a requirement that they turn in this plan to be reviewed by Dr. Warkup and have it be reviewed as a requirement. And have Councilor Marola write it up as such for the amendment to the ordinance. Andre?
I was just going to say exactly everything you just said. We have 1,000 year-round residents who we represent, and we kept very safe back in March. And I think a large portion of them are still very uneasy about this opening. And their concerns are valid, and as they were back in March. And I think I'm not afraid to use the word requirement, because that's just good policy of living in the community and doing business in the community you're doing business in. I agree with what Martha. The governor's office is asking for this. I don't think the businesses have a problem with this. It's a quarantine plan in case one of their employees gets sick. And I think, like I said, Ken, I agree with you 100%. I think if an outbreak comes in one of these places, congregate living places, and the state comes down and says, what are you going to do? And there is no plan. How will we look as leaders of this community? So I'm 100% for it, exactly how Ken just described it.
Thank you, Andre. Just one more note, Nicole Verdi did suggest that the plan possibly includes some sort of a methodology or a location for anyone who needs to be seriously quarantined, following a positive verdict or a positive test. That perhaps maybe one possibility is to have arrangements made and or a plan in place to do that on the mainland, where it might be more appropriate. But that was a suggestion from her office. But she said, they're hesitant to do a blanket regulation for the mainland, but they'd love to see the island handle it in our own fashion. So Sven Riesem?
I think it's up to the business to have in their plan how they're going to quarantine people, feed them, support them, make sure that they have a private bathroom, et cetera, based on DOH, CDC, all that. So I think any of the businesses should do that. Dr. Warkup just brought something up, and Chris, it was a great question. If we're talking about two people in a room, you just covered a large part of the island that, has all kinds of implications and may or may not be business driven. It just may be three people living in a room, and so then how do we manage that? I'm fine with requiring it, especially of the businesses, but I'm just trying to think about, so anybody renting basically has to have then a quarantine plan that they're responsible for. And I think I like it. It's a bit of a shift than talking about the Spring House or 1661 or National or, whatever. So we should just discuss that and make sure how we do it.
Martha?
Aren't we talking about the businesses and about the workers that come in that don't have any fallback. If people come in and rent a house, if somebody gets sick, unless they get very, very sick very, very fast, they're gonna have the ability to get off island and get wherever they need to go. I think we're going to get lost in the weeds if we try to regulate everybody in every house on Block Island. We have the businesses that I think everybody's most concerned about. I'm most concerned about that. I'm a lot more concerned about a lot of kids living together, even though, statistically they're the less vulnerable than, folks who rent a house and come from, I don't know, we always say Connecticut. They've got the resources to get themselves back where they need to go.
I think the plans that the hotels and the restaurants, whoever should include the options for both those folks who are in hotel or business supplied housing, and also for their employees who may be renting on their own, who may be living in their own parents' homes. So they can have one plan for those employees who they're supplying housing from, and another plan that their employees will need to follow if they're living in their uncle's home or their grandmother's home or something like that. Chris Willie?
Yeah, Sven brought up a good observation, and I'll use the Coast Guard station housing as an example. I don't know how it's run now, but back in the day, you didn't necessarily work with your roommate. They could have worked at the beach and someone else could have worked for Harbors or what have you. But there are situations like that where friends rent a room from somebody, and they don't necessarily work, or they work for 2 or 3 different entities out here. So, this can get, without getting complicated, I think we have to start somewhere, and it should apply to all the businesses that employ people that are basically renting rooms with more than one person in it, and have some sort of plan. If that's landlords, then maybe that's the route to go. I don't know, but it certainly is important. And to Ken and Andre's point, it is a big concern. So I think we should be as proactive as we can. But I think the scope of it is bigger than what we're presenting it. Obviously, the big entities out here that employ a lot of people and have their own congregate housing is one entity, but there are a lot of spider webs that go out from it that we have to consider. So
I think some of those considerations will come in Dr. Workup's line of fire when the person is diagnosed with a positive case. At that point, I think the medical center will be analyzing where they're living, what their housing situation is, and what might be an appropriate methodology for quarantining them. Am I right, Tom?
You're correct. And Chris's point is really well taken. That scenario that he describes is something that is very concerning to us, because that cross-pollination of a person going to multiple businesses, where if you have a set crew, you can somewhat isolate them from each other and keep track of them. But that is part of that contact tracing process that you just mentioned. And that would have to be really conducted by the DOH with our assistance.
Jim Kern?
I'm kind of where Martha was. I think you guys want to try to stay focused on the things you can have meaningful impact on, and the things that are somewhat unique to Block Island, right? The large grouping, although in some ways, as Dr. Workup says, it's more controllable and traceable. You could have a couple of kids sharing an apartment in any number of towns in Rhode Island. The thing that you're trying to focus on is a motion that says that, or a direction to Solicitor Marola to draft an amendment to the ordinance that requires employers, because I think you can make a meaningful requirement of an employer to create a plan and share that plan with the medical director, either concurrent with receiving a license, or subsequent, or how you term that is kind of detail and execution, but some version of that edict to employers to create a plan and share it with the medical director relative to how they will prevent and respond to virus management, for lack of a better term, with their congregate living group.
Thank you, Jim. With all due respect, I'd say we want them to do more than share with them, though. I think we want the medical director's approval of the plan. Because they could share it with him and he could give them suggestions. They could say, yeah, thanks anyway. So I want to have it and include the terms approval. So Ben Reesum.
I like I think we're really there. So I guess my key deliverables or key thoughts for Catherine would be employers, employer-based, required to everybody's comments. And it's part of the license, minimum housing license. And I guess the way I would do it, especially given that June 1st is here, within 3 days, 5 days of getting the license, they've got to have this done. Or we can make it, they have to have the plan reviewed before they can pick up the license. It's up to the council, but I think a very short period of time. And given that we're talking now days, it's 27th today, I'd give everybody a couple of days just because Dr. Workup's going to be pretty busy.
Right. I agree. Further comment?
Question, Ken?
Catherine?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So I'm just trying to make sure I understand. Is this going to apply to entities and individuals with rooming house licenses? Is this going to apply to businesses that employ, let's say, 2 or more non-island residents who require seasonal housing? Because they don't always overlap.
Right. No, good point. Absolutely. No, I think this needs to apply to any businesses who provide employee housing for their employees, and you can make that more specific as necessary.
Because that might not necessarily be tied to rooming house licenses, is my point.
Right. I think that it needs to.
Can't we just make it broad without the tying it to the license? Because that, again, as Kathy just said, narrows it down.
Right.
I think everybody knows what we're talking about. We're going to get lost in the minutia and not get this done.
So the qualifying factor is. Go ahead, Martha.
I'm finished. Thank you.
The qualifying factor will be if you provide housing for your employees. Am I right?
I agree.
I think that makes sense.
Okay. I'll make a motion to, I'm sorry, go ahead, Martha, is that you again?
No, it wasn't. I may have made it. Yeah, I guess. Okay, fine. I'm fine.
Okay.
I'm just going, Ken, I'm just going in and out a lot because my allergies bother me and I'm afraid I'm going to start coughing.
Okay. Well, if you want to, you just keep popping up green though whenever you make a noise. So that's the only reason I'm doing it.
Okay, well, that's why I'm muting. I think it's because I'm muting and unmuting a lot.
Okay.
Martha, you got to get rid of that Kong shell and get on video.
Ben Reesum.
If we're not tying it to the license, can we say it has to happen in a certain, or that this review of the plan has to be done by June 5th? I just don't want it to linger, and I think a deadline is pretty critical.
Yeah, Tom, do you have a suggestion in terms of timing? Would June 6th be enough time, or June 5th or something, or?
That'd be fine with me. I think it's an important item, so I'll dedicate whatever time it takes to turn it around quickly.
Okay. All right, like I said, this is just one aspect of the amended emergency ordinance. I think we should do it individually, though. There may be others that may come up, but I think we should do it individually. So I'll make a motion to have Councilor Marola draw up an amendment to the emergency ordinance of the town of New Shoreham to include a requirement that any businesses providing employee housing shall present a plan for remediation of positive tested employees for coronavirus by June 6th for approval by the medical director of the Block Island Health Center.
Second.
Seconded by Andre. Discussion?
Ken, Bill McComb, I have a question.
Go ahead, Bill McComb.
So what's the criteria for the approval on this, as opposed to everything coming out of the state or guidelines? I mean, I think it's a good idea to look at it, but I think when it's approval as opposed to guidelines, essentially we're having a private company approve this, and what's the guidelines for that, for approval or denial?
Yeah, Tom?
Sure. Thanks for the question. I think the standard I would use would be, is it a reasonable plan? Just a reasonable assumption that it doesn't have to be perfect. Many things are imperfect. Is that it meet a reasonable standard in which that we can isolate and quarantine a patient that may be COVID positive, given that our next phone call is going to be with the DOH and getting their guidance and assistance. So the standard would be what a reasonable person would do.
Based on CDC and DOH guidelines, correct?
Correct.
Bill, do you think that answers the question?
It does. I just think that I think it could be problematic if if something's rejected on it, and I think that I think that's, I guess, the difference between guideline and approval. And the other thing is, does it also put the medical center into any type of a liability issue of approving these plans also? I just think guidelines gives it a better swath than the approval or not approved.
I think we need to have a harder edge on the regulation than just a nod, a nod and a wink. I think it needs to have the approval on there.
Hey, Ken,
Ben Reeson?
quick question, and Catherine or Tom, maybe you can answer this best. The wording that Ken used was sort of a positive response remediation. Do you feel that there's any benefit to putting in words like quarantine plans or any of the more details, or is the wording appropriate? I don't care either way. I just want to get Catherine or Tom's feeling, Dr. Wilcox's feeling.
Well, can I speak?
Go ahead.
Ken. Well, I can foresee circumstances where the plan might not be quarantining on Block Island. It may be putting them somewhere else or doing something else, whatever the medical center director would deem appropriate. But I think the guidelines are going to be the CDC and Rhode Island Department of Health guidelines.
Chris Willie?
I just wanted to Bill's question, I just wanted to remind him that we're asked to do this by the state because they're leaning towards doing a sweeping, or if they were leaning towards doing a sweeping order by the governor specific to this, it would be devastating to island businesses if they were to take a state approach to it. We're being offered a local approach, and the obvious thing to do is to involve our medical center. And as far as whether or not it's guidelines or being mandatory, we're going to go with mandatory. And if there's liability issues, I'm willing to run that risk. But the state's asking us to do this, so let's just do it and work with them. And if they want to make any changes or make any modifications to it, or any recommendations for us to modify it, then we can cross that bridge when we get there. But we're already, almost in June, and this is something that we need to get done 2 weeks ago. So I'd like to get this moved forward.
Okay. Any further comments or questions?
Ken, Peter Gemp.
Pete Kemp, go ahead.
regarding the overlook, there should be no one in there, as I understand, until June 1st. Is that correct?
Pete, I think that that's a specific item and it's not part of the agenda. It's not part of the motion right now. So I don't want to take that up at this time. We can take it up with the town manager or someone else maybe tomorrow.
Okie dokie.
Any further comments on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Ben?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Martha?
Aye.
I'm affirmative. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you all. I'll point out, if I might, before we carry on, that during the conference this afternoon with the governor's office and with the department heads and the other towns and communities, the governor and her workforce are going to start looking at, they're going to start a dialogue on regulations involving beaches and weddings and other things like that. And they're looking for specific suggestions with a coastal, what they call the coastal perspective. That is what the towns along the coast are concerned about in terms of their tourism, their workforce, what we're worried about. They actually said that we set off the alarm in terms of our housing situation out here. And so that got them to thinking. And they want to know if the towns, including us, have any suggestions. They're going to be reaching out. They're going to be calling the Chamber of Commerce also. But they're looking for input in the very near future on these issues and summer tourism and anything involved with it. So there'll be an opportunity for us to weigh in if we have any thoughts or concerns moving forward.
Is this from the town? They're asking for, Ken, are they asking for the town's input or?
Yeah, they're asking for all the towns along the coast, any that have, the summers like we have, as opposed to places like Cranston and Warwick and things like that.
So that's for town, not individuals, like, or.
Right, yeah, the town, right. And also, they also are going to be reaching out to the Chamber of Commerce's in the various towns and that sort of thing, tourism councils and everything else. So they want to know, they're trying to figure out how they're going to address all the concerns of summer. So that just came down today. So
what's the action plan on that for us?
Well, the action plan, I'm bringing it up in case we have any concerns we want to point out to them. We can have a discussion either tonight, or we can have a discussion at our next meeting to forward information to the state for consideration. Right now, the agenda item is to any concerns we have about amending our emergency ordinance related to work activities and other items. So that's still the item on the table. That's still the discussion on the table.
Thank you.
Concerns? Anyone have any questions or comments at this point? Other comments? Sven, go ahead.
I mean, just to be very clear, the way I believe I know we are, and for everybody else on the phone or on Zoom, we're basically with the state. So other than what we just passed and asked to be written up, really don't have work activities anymore, or 2 people on a site or any of that. So where the state goes, we go. Ken, to your point a second ago, we may tighten back down if things go south, or, large weddings sort of scare me, and I think a lot of people. But so I think right now we're with the state, and maybe at the next meeting, Ken, we can talk about the request from the DOH about that. That'd be a good agenda item, because that's a big deal.
Okay. All right. Yeah, they're gonna, like I said, they're just beginning the conversation now, so it's an ongoing process. Other comments or questions concerning item 6 on the agenda? Anything anyone want to bring up?
Nothing from me.
Okay, thank you, Martha. Okay. Catherine, do you need anything else for us on that item?
Well, I just would like to reiterate what my notes say to make sure that we're all on the same page. And basically, it's my understanding that this vote is that all businesses that provide employee housing shall present a plan for remediation. We can make that a little more articulate. In the event that an employee tests positive for coronavirus, to the medical center director for approval by June 5th.
Yep.
Okay.
Sounds good to me. Do we have to do the, do we have to do the 409B with this also?
Yes, because the motion was just directing me to draft it.
Then the ordinance, right?
And then you and Molly,
Right.
I know, right, Ken?
Okay.
So if you're saying to just go ahead and do this without the council meeting to approve the draft, then I'll just go with this language. You need to tell me, I assume that it's going to be effective immediately.
Yeah.
And then I can do the amendment to the last emergency ordinance.
Okay. Yeah, that's the plan. But do I have to do a motion involving 409B again?
If you're going to adopt that right now, yes.
Okay, I'll make a motion pertinent to, relative to ordinance 409B, to have Councilor Marola adapt or change the amended emergency ordinance of the town of New Shoreham to reflect our previous motion.
Second.
Seconded by Andre. Chris, go ahead.
Does this, just for clarification?
Sure.
We have, this is the only thing that, and Sven, you said, this is the only thing we're more strict than the state on. Is this motion also include changing the existing emergency ordinance to be in line with the state other than that item? Or is that going to be a separate motion?
It doesn't yet. No, it does not.
Okay, just for clarification, thank you.
Okay. All's in favor, Andre?
Aye.
Ben?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Martha?
Aye.
I vote in the affirmative. Motion carries 5-0. Chris, go ahead.
No, I'm good.
Okay, all right. Sven, do you have something?
Well, I mean, just follow up on Chris, and maybe it's a Catherine question. I mean, since we are with the state, Catherine, at least I don't know how to best word it. How does that fit into the ordinance that sort of meandered through the last 8 weeks with corrections? I mean, do we need to rewrite anything, or really to Chris's point, that basically we're with the state, so really now the emergency ordinance is just this one piece? How does that technically work?
We can be more restrictive, but not less restrictive than the state. The state has kind of been a moving target. I guess the best way to look at it is to see what the current status of the ordinance is, and decide whether or not you want to move with the state or you want to stay more restrictive. A lot of the paragraphs have moved more with the state in the past iterations of the document.
Do we need to go through it and have it on our next agenda to those we need to specifically change?
You can do that. I mean, you still have your restricted activity provisions. You still have the provisions. You have general provisions about short-term lodging owners and operators, cease taking new reservations, pertaining to occupancy dates which would occur prior to June 1. So some of these will be expiring shortly anyway.
Right.
So it's a question of looking at the ordinance, and as I said, it has evolved to be more in line with the state. But looking at the provisions that are left, which would be in the form of the ordinance adopted on May 20th, and make the council determination as a policy decision whether or not the more restrictive provisions they want to keep in or remove.
Chris Willie?
Yeah, I think that's, the mechanics of this are, I think more my question is, do we let this expire? Okay, and let everything in this expire except for the what was just approved, which has to be complied with by June 6th regarding the housing. All of this that's left would expire June 1. I'm more interested in what are the mechanics behind us changing this, or just let it expire and then move forward with basically something new if that needs to exist.
Catherine?
Okay, Chris is absolutely correct. The way the ordinance reads right now, everything in it expires at midnight on June 1. So if this new proposed regulation, it may make more sense to put it in a separate ordinance if the council is going to make the determination that they want everything else to expire on June 1.
I agree. On 6th.
Is everyone comfortable with having everything else expire?
I am, except for what we just approved.
Okay. Andre?
I mean, we discussed we're still doing tracking for the building department, right, from all filing contractors?
Correct.
Are we still doing that?
Yeah.
And that would expire June 1st?
Jim Kern?
Yes. Yes and yes.
I mean, we can let it expire, I guess, but I always thought that was a good way of tracking where people from hotspots are on the island. And that would be one thing in there that I would like to keep, but I mean, again, we don't have to keep a whole emergency ordinance just for that. But I don't want to lose sight of that. And I feel as though it's a good way of tracking where people are that, are coming from different spots that they have higher numbers.
Jim, go ahead.
When the governor's 14-day quarantine for out-of-state travel expires June 1st, my recommendation would be to cease the registration program. I think it's been very successful. I think it's been useful, but all that's left at that point, it would be trying to identify people who are coming from areas that are in stay-at-home orders, which are relatively speaking, small areas in the East Coast or outside of the region. So if the approach is to allow the items in here that expire June 1st, which is what my recommendation would be in terms of mechanics, I think the registration should also stay.
I would also point out that the governor's regulations also, her regulations at the moment, and I think they're going to continue, are including a daily log anyway, which is, which identifies where people have been. I've got one on the dashboard of my truck, so the people are supposed to be keeping that as part of the state regulations, which we're referring to. Catherine?
Yes?
I'm sorry, I thought you had something to say.
No.
Okay.
Ken, is Pete?
Go ahead, Pete. Peter Gemp.
I'm still confused on. We were speaking about employee housing, and when I asked that question, I still confused on the answer you gave me.
The answer I gave you is because it wasn't part of the discussion we were having. It was more specific to a certain particular situation, but it didn't have any pertinence to the discussion we were having specifically about our vote. So if you have a question about a possible violation, then that should be taken up tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay.
I have one more comment.
Go ahead, Catherine Marola.
Thank you. We do have in the current ordinance the language that expiration date of all taxi motor vehicles for hire licenses is extended to June 30th, and no license permit issued by the town should be subject to loss or revocation during the 2020 calendar year. We probably should just move those two in with the new one so that there's no question that those continue.
Hold on, Sven. Jim Kern.
The same comment.
Thank you. Sven Riesum. Sven, you're muted.
It would seem simpler to me whether it's to rewrite a new resolution, Catherine, or just wipe out and delete a lot. But those, like to taxi, is to the end of the month. This one is to the one we just passed is June 6th. I mean, I think that if we have one that sort of goes on through the summer and is really trimmed down to just the differences from the state, that would seem a lot simpler for anybody who wants to read it to know how we're different than the state. So that they can read the state material and say, okay, now I'm going to read the Block Island one and see, oh, a taxi or a medical center approval. So I would lean
Can I say
that way.
something?
Sorry.
This is Martha. Can I say something?
Go ahead, Martha.
I'd really like to get the piece on the, I'm just going to call it quarantine, done. And let's not hold up that. And we can deal with the rest of the ordinance next week.
The quarantine's done, isn't it?
Well, I don't want it to get, it should be, but I don't want it not to be written.
No, it's going to be written.
But I don't want it to be written with everything else, then having to have everything else be incorporated. I really just put that in and then take everything out afterwards. I think this whole, we're just going to muddy the waters. I want it to be really clear that that's done.
There won't be anything to take out. It expires June 1st, the rest of the ordinance.
Well,
So we're talking about. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I started to cough. I'm like, I mean, the only things we have left, the taxi has to stay in because that's not losing the license. That can't go anywhere.
Right. To Sven's point, we can just have Catherine write in the new amendment that we had, the ordinance that we had just voted on, and have that just be incorporated along with whatever's left that's pertinent of the old ordinance, and have that be a standalone. I don't think that's.
But does that all have to come back to us if it becomes this whole new document?
No.
I'm gonna be sure.
Catherine, you answer that question.
I think the safest thing to do is to instruct me as part of a motion to include the language which is currently in paragraph 7B and C. I'm sorry, paragraph 7C and D, which is the expiration of the taxi and motor vehicle for hire licenses extended to June 30th. And no license or permit issued by the town shall be subject to loss or revocation during the 2020 calendar year for the license/permit holder's failure to use the license during the 2020 calendar year. So if I take those two items and add them to the one that you just voted on, all businesses that provide employee housing, we would have a simple one that would continue through the summer, that and the other one would lapse on its own on June 1.
Sounds like a plan.
Sorry, I've got another question
Go ahead, Martha.
about outdoor entertainment licenses. Did we just let those all go? I can't remember.
I can respond.
Go ahead, Catherine.
Outdoor entertainment licenses, in the last iteration of the document, we basically just said all licenses and permits issued by the town, including without limitation, special event permits and outdoor entertainment licenses, are subject to the COVID-19 orders and regulations issued by the state of Rhode Island and the town of New Shoreham. So we basically just put those right in line with the state, and we don't need an ordinance that says that because the state is already saying that.
Okay, I've got a question about this, and this is a Department of Health question, I think. And this is something that I had no idea about. I'm on the board of the Harbor Church, and we've had having some conversation about singing and how bad it is. I had no idea. And then I started looking things up, and places, choirs have had problems. Choirs are shut down, church choirs. That the projection is so much more with singing than it is with talking. And I'd really like to get a read from the DOH on that.
Jim Kern?
I'm not responding to that, so if somebody needs to, I'll pause for a second.
Sven?
I was actually gonna make sure something else, so let's keep going on with this comment.
Okay.
No, that was my comment. I made my comment.
No, I know,
I
I know.
just like to get a read from DOH.
I don't have an answer for you on it.
I wasn't looking for an answer. I was looking for an answer from DOH, if it's even on their radar.
Okay, all right. Well, we can actually try to bring it up during the daily conference calls, Martha. I'll try and remember tomorrow. Jim?
I have, this is for the council and for Kathy, as it is not altogether clear how FEMA reimbursement or other prospective, existing or prospective federal reimbursement programs might treat an emergency ordinance that has lapsed. So I think it would be in our interest to, although the substance of the items in our ongoing emergency ordinance, I think can be contracted as has been discussed. I think it's probably in our interest, and I just want to bring it up to the council so Kathy and I can work on it in the next couple of days, in our interest to keep the emergency ordinance in existence through this entire period, not rescind it, which nobody has suggested, and not let it lapse. Because we wouldn't want to get in a position where any of our reimbursement requests were denied because the emergency ordinance had lapsed. So it's a technical issue. Just wanted to raise it so that Kathy's not in a position where, well, that's not what the council really voted. Just want to leave it open and contract the substantive parts.
Thank you, Jim. That was brought up this afternoon by Governor Alonso, and they couldn't totally reassure him that it might be, that it wouldn't be hazardous to have no emergency ordinance in place. So they said, you know, it might be a good idea to keep part of it, like you said. Sven Reesum?
So that was going to be my point to Catherine, is as we write this, the emergency ordinance is basically just being trimmed down significantly, but we still have it. And I agree that it should probably even go through December 31st or whenever, just in case we ever need to lock down tight, we have this in process. So I guess that just means we got to keep 409ing it.
Right.
So I have a question.
Catherine Burrow, go ahead.
This new ordinance that I'm writing, we've already gone over the fact that it's going to have the old businesses part. It's going to have the part about the licenses and the taxi license pickup. I can include in there, if there's a concern about having an emergency ordinance effect, basically the language that we have in the current ordinance, which requires everyone to conduct activities in accordance with the state and that kind of general language, if that's an issue that we need to have an emergency ordinance in effect.
I think that would be a good idea. I think it's a good stopgap measure, a good fallback position. Absolutely.
And then we still have the paragraphs in the ordinance that say a violation of any provision of this emergency ordinance is punishable by fine not exceeding $500 and blah, blah, blah. New Shore Police Department is instructed to enforce the provisions of this emergency ordinance. Are these enforcement paragraphs to be put in the new one?
Yes.
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Okay. Andre?
Yeah.
Okay, so then I would need a motion on that as well.
Okay.
All right. So can I just go ahead, Sven?
I was just going to say, Kathy, and then one last thing, buses, do we need to add anything about buses or maintain anything about buses? And I'm thinking whether it's the interstate bus or it's a school bus or a,
Those are
Charter,
probably covered by the state.
okay, so it's within the state guidelines. Thank you.
All right.
Should we, I mean,
Ken?
about,
Go ahead, on.
yeah, should we ask our, I mean, do we have Vin Carlone on the line? Do we have Peter Gimp? I mean, should we ask for their input on that?
On what?
About leaving that, you know, the enforcement part in there?
You can certainly do that.
Are they here? Okay.
Chief Carlone, are you in the?
Bill McComb's on. Are you asking a question of Pete and I?
Well, I was kind of wondering about, you know, enforcement and leaving that in the ordinance. I'm just wondering if Chief Carlone was here to ask to give some input if he wanted to, but I don't know if he's here or not. So we'll leave it in.
I think the only difference is if we're going by the state ordinance or the state regulations with the rest of everything else, I'm not sure you're going to find that in the state regulations. I mean, we can be more restrictive, but in terms of punitive, I'm not sure that we're going to line up with the state. Because at this point, the governor is saying that she can't force people to wear masks. So, Chris Willie?
It's still an emergency ordinance, and with emergency ordinance, you have to have a penalty clause. It's just, why have the ordinance, Ken? Like, and as far as, you know, the mask thing, Newport's now considering, after what happened this past weekend, fining people because it was a disaster. So yes, we're going to keep it in, and you know, we asked for some input, but we didn't get it. So if that has to be another motion to keep that portion in, then let's.
You won't make a motion to take it out. So we need a motion that's going to include 7C and 7D with the other motion that we did in relative to housing plans.
Can we, I'm sorry, Ken, may I? I mean, we're getting lost here. And all right, so from what I can gather, what we're doing here is we are eliminating our current emergency ordinance in favor of another ordinance that has just what's specific to Block Island in that. Is that what we're doing, Kathy?
Well, according to my notes, what we're doing is we're going to let the current one lapse, and I'm going to create a new one, which will provide the all businesses part, which you've already voted on. I'm going to keep the general language that all persons on Block Island shall fully comply with all federal, state, and local emergency directives and orders, as shall be from time to time amended. And I'm going to include the provisions 7C and D, which is, you know, the tax fee and the licenses. And then lastly, keeping paragraphs 14 and 15, which are the enforcement provisions.
Okay, so that will be our new quote unquote emergency ordinance that we will approve at some point. Monday, I would imagine. I don't know. Am I correct on that?
Yes, if that's how you want to handle, if you want to approve it on Monday.
I don't know when. I just said that as a date. Ken, do you have any input on that? Because
why do we need to meet again to approve it? We're approving all the components of it now.
Okay, all right. I just want to make sure for, you know, point of, you know, clarity. I just want to make sure we're not getting rid of important parts of our emergency ordinance. Because, you know, there are a lot of people that are still concerned about this. You know, there are still illnesses. There is still, the state's still, you know, recording them daily. We're opening, you know, we're going by the state, but the health, there's still a major concern about the health of the population of the year-round people on this island. And I know that I don't want to weaken our emergency ordinance. I know we're adding to it. I'm just making sure we're not weakening it in any way. Kathy, are we doing that?
Well, if things lapse on June 1, then I guess weakening would be a good word, because you're no longer going to have your restricted activities, which require that those people inform the town manager's designee and register the way that they have been doing in the past.
Right. And we've had input on that maybe that's not, not going to be continued after June 1st. And I know that's up to us, but, all right. So Ken, I'll let you take over from here. I just wanted some clarification.
Ken, Bill McComb, when you have a minute.
Bill McComb, go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a question on the taxi licenses for being able to abeyance or put off later. Does that also include the bus licenses?
Catherine, can you answer that?
As it currently exists, the ordinance says the expiration date of all taxi and motor vehicle for hire licenses is extended to June 30th, 2020. Those are the ones that are encompassed in the current ordinance.
Okay, so the bottom line is we have two bus licenses, one which I have. Is that included or not? If it isn't, I'd like it to be.
As it reads right now, it talks about taxi and motor vehicle for hire licenses.
Well, is the bus a motor vehicle for hire?
We don't know that.
That I would have to go back to the ordinances and look if that's within, maybe is Molly on the line? She might know.
It should be, but can we get it clarified? Because I think
Right.
that was the intent.
Are you on the line?
Yeah, I don't think we need Molly on that. We just need to clarify it ourselves so we can move on. And how are we going to do that? How are we going to do that?
Well,
The attorney.
I'm looking it up right now.
Thank you, Kathy.
Just give me a second. Talk about something else. Give me a chance.
Well, my question was whether or not if the entire ordinance is sunsetting on June 1st and we have to write a new ordinance, or if we can just renew those portions of the ordinance and add the new one to it so that there's continuity
And change the date.
and change the date.
The date's the biggest thing. To Andre's point, I think as long as we change the date, then nothing expires, or to your point, we clean it up and we keep the restrictions the way they are right now. Otherwise, it's the state.
Bill, are you saying that you're going to wait a little while to put your bus on? Is that what you're saying? You want to keep it for a little while? You want to not use it and keep the license? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, well, I received from the town hall a thing saying if I want to leave in abeyance that I could. You had that option, and that was extended like you had, just like the cabs. Since you can only put 15 people on it, it's at the current time. It's something I want to weigh out, have an option, just like the cabs have. And like I said, I received all the mail to do it. I just want to make sure that if you pass an ordinance, that it was so we didn't end up having to go back and address it, because apparently that was the intent, because that's what I received.
Okay, so you're just asking that question because you received something from town hall that said you can keep your license in abeyance, but you're just not sure if we actually changed the ordinance to reflect that?
Right, correct. I
Okay.
thought it had been, but as it was read here, so I don't know if this needed to be tweaked, so it included buses with the,
Thank you.
whichever it might be. Thank you.
I'm looking
Catherine?
forward to our solicitor's answer.
Yes, I'm looking at the ordinance right now, section 8-162. It does have a separate paragraph for charter. I mean, to me, it looks as though taxi, charter bus, or limousine licenses are all put together in the same category. In other words, they're motor vehicles for hire.
Right. So it's covered. Okay.
So you are covered,
Thank
Bill.
you.
Yeah, so I guess whatever that
Thank-
letter is, just follow the directions on it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for asking.
Sven, do you want to make a motion?
Actually, Kathy, I think you got most of it. Can you just read it back?
Sure. The motion basically is that you're going to let the current ordinance, emergency ordinance, lapse by its terms on June 1, except for the fact that certain provisions are going to be transferred into the new emergency ordinance, and those are paragraph 7C and D pertaining to licenses, the general language, which is paragraph 12, that everyone has to comply with the state and CDC regulations as amended, the paragraph 14 and 15, which are the enforcement paragraphs, and of course, the one that you originally adopted, which was the businesses that provide employee housing must present the plan.
So said.
Motion by Sven. Do I have a second? I'll second it. Chris, go ahead.
Will that satisfy the point that Jim Kern brought up, right? I just want to be clear. Jim Kern's point about, I think it was reimbursement or
Funds.
Yeah,
funds.
yeah, there'll be an emergency ordinance in place.
All right, I just wanted to make sure that's we're
Yeah,
covered.
from the discussion I heard this afternoon, that's a good covering our base. Motion made by Sven, seconded by myself. Any further comments or questions? All those in favor, Andre?
No, I oppose that. I think we should just add those to the existing ordinance. Because the protections that are in place with the transient workers coming from hotspots are already in there. That's going to be removed. It's a good way of tracking people who are on the island who are coming from hotspots. I wouldn't like to see it removed. So I would like to just see those, what we created today, added to the original ordinance. So added to that ordinance and extended for a period of time. As I said, this virus is not letting up, and I don't think we should let up either. So I'm voting no.
Sven?
Voting.
Point of order.
Point of order. Martha, go ahead.
Does this have to be unanimous to pass?
Catherine?
No, the decision to amend the ordinance under the charter because of emergency provisions, that's the one that has to be.
You got it wrapped in.
I think
Okay.
you already voted on that
We
one.
already voted to amend the charter. I mean,
Right.
amend the ordinance.
And yes,
Okay, Sven,
Aye.
Chris,
Aye.
Martha?
Nay.
I vote affirmative. Motion carries 3-2. Next item on the agenda is to receive a communication from Chris Warfel regarding solar projects and instruct the town manager to investigate. We do have a letter. We did receive a letter from Chris Warfel concerning the solar projects, specifically done at Cherry Hill Lane, and the nature of those projects. I'd like to make a motion to have the letter forwarded to the town manager and have him investigate the allegations of the letter and report back to the council.
Second.
Seconded by Sven. Because there's potential for litigation, I'm not gonna, I prefer not to have an open discussion on this until we hear back from the town manager.
Are the letters public? In case the public wants to inquire?
Did it run in the paper?
No, it was not.
Well, they came to the town clerk, so,
It was distributed to the town council. Yes, it was.
okay. so it's public.
Right.
Okay.
That was my motion, seconded by Sven, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
All those in favor, Chris,
Aye.
Andre,
Aye.
Ben?
Aye.
Martha?
Aye.
I vote affirmative. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Next item on the agenda will be to discuss options for public participation in public hearing and set a public hearing date for application for 54 Dodge Street. Andre, would you take over for a minute, please?
Yeah. All right. So what are,
Andre?
this dog is barking. Andre, take over.
Oh,
Dog
it's me.
Dog starts barking.
I gotta mute.
Okay, so agenda item number 8, discuss options for public participation in public hearing and set a public hearing date for an application from 54 Dodge Street, Block Island, OPCO LLC, and a New Sharon zoning ordinance. Is Molly, town clerk, on here?
I am, Andre. Thank you.
All right.
And I'm unable to raise my hand because I'm a co-host.
No, that's okay. Do you want to give us a little background on this item?
Sure. I'm not going to get too much into the substance of the ordinance amendments because that's not on your agenda. And discuss options for public participation was covered in the earlier agenda items. But I would recommend that the first item, the application for 54 Dodge Street to amend the definition of accessory hotel rooms, be set for a public hearing date on July 6th.
Okay, and we are going to go with the plans for a public hearing through the same ones that Amy spelled out earlier. Is that?
That's what I anticipate. Now, long ago, these the 4 amendments were set up for the same night, but I recommend splitting them up. And I think the logical way to do that would be to hold the 54 Dodge Street application July 6th, to hold the 2 applications or the 2 amendments that pertain to building height on July 15th, and hold the definition of developable land on August 3rd.
And is there any reason for those dates? Because I know some people may be waiting for the decision on this to move forward with projects. Who was in the pipeline first, and does that matter?
It may matter. I was looking at it from a management of public input point of view, and with the new managing the amount of people that I expect to be commenting through Zoom on this, I just wanted to get more experience before we went into the developable land, because we easily have 60 individual commenters on that through email.
Yeah, form letters. I saw all those. I wouldn't. Okay. Kenny, you back? Are you recusing for something or?
No.
Okay.
If you want to hold on, I can tell you when those applications were submitted.
Go ahead. Hang on, Molly. Sven's got a question.
Molly, I think I happen to really like the fact that you just laid out a plan. I thought that was great. I think Andre's question is good about order, but doing these on one night would just kill us. And it sounded like there was 3 weeks between the first one and the fourth one. Is that correct? 3 or 4 weeks?
I mean, I would have given, I didn't see it, so I haven't worked up a calendar.
Yeah, it doesn't mean she gets first dibs, but if she's
Okay.
shooting for the 6th, if you can bump it yours to the 13th.
Sounds like she's working on it.
Ken, you're out of the room, or Andre, I don't know if you want to summarize for Ken, but basically Molly laid out the 4 public hearings.
Okay.
dates.
Can I spill this?
Oh, yeah, by all means. I'll do it, but I figured instead of us doing it in public, to say, you know, these plans may
You-
involve.
You're not on mute.
Sven, do you have still have a question?
Ken, we're waiting just about public hearing dates. I made the suggestion of, just whoever was in the pipeline first should probably have the first public hearing. I know there's a lot of things on this. Then, well, hello.
Okay, well, sounds like we're waiting for an answer from Molly, so I'll hold.
Yeah, we're gonna go through these really quick because we're just setting public hearing dates, right?
Yep.
And the public participation's already been decided about financial town meetings, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've got a question about this, and I may be confusing my zoning and my town council. But if we have applicants that are going to be presenting and people that are going to be objecting or supporting, that's going to reach different. Does that reach a level of testimony? I'm not sure. I can't remember. We don't swear people in, do we?
No. No,
So-
not for a public hearing.
Even a zoning hearing.
Zoning does.
I know zoning does. I'm asking if the council does when acting upon a zoning hearing, if anybody anticipates the necessity of that.
Not that I recall.
Okay, I just said the question.
I don't recall that ever having happened in our previous zoning amendments that we've done. So unless someone can tell me. All right.
Well, maybe we should have. Maybe we have more people tell the truth.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm not laughing at that.
So I guess we're waiting for an answer from Molly still.
She's probably been talking the whole time. She just doesn't know she's muted.
Those files are in my home office is the problem. So I'm looking for stuff that may not be on my computer.
Okay, so we may have to table this until our next meeting. If we
Right.
want, I gather what you're wondering is which one should be scheduled first. So in order to do that, we need when they were applied for first.
I don't.
It's
Sure, yeah. I think it would be fine to do them July 6th, July 15th, and August 3rd, but we can do that at your next meeting.
Unless the council has another plan. Any other ideas?
I mean, I don't know. We're just setting public hearings dates, July 6th, July 15th, and whatever. I don't know.
August 6th.
I don't know. I mean, we're just setting dates.
Ben
Go
Reese,
ahead, Ken. I mean, I'm sorry, Ken.
I
you
thought
go.
Andre's question was really good around, everybody wants those hearings to happen for their different purposes. How about we set the calendar and if, just so people can plan, but if there's a change, we can make that change at the next meeting, or do you want to wait? Either way, let's do one.
You can't set it so people can plan and then say you're going to change it.
I'm happy carrying this over to your next meeting.
okay, it's only gonna be next week, so
Let's do it.
All right.
I'll make a motion to table the items 8, 9, and 10.
Second.
Second by Andre. Any further discussion? All's in favor, Andre?
Aye.
Ben? Aye. Chris Willie?
Aye.
Aye.
I vote in the affirmative. Motion carries 5-0. Unless I lost a piece, a sheet of my agenda, was that the last item on the agenda?
Yes.
That is it. Does anybody in our,
And what was the last motion? I'm sorry.
The last motion was to table the items of setting dates for public hearing until our next meeting.
All four of them, right?
Yeah,
Okay, thanks.
well, that's what I was asking. Were there 4 or 3?
There's four. That's why I asked the question.
There are 4. I recommend combining 2 of them because they're technical and they're on the same topic. I
Oh.
recommended combining the 2 building height.
Okay, well, that's the one, that's what.
Great.
All right, so the motion was correct. We tabled 7, 8, I'm sorry, we tabled 8, 9, and 10. So we did it.
No, we tabled 8, 9, 10, and 11
yes.
because 2 of those are combined, but it's still 4 items on the agenda.
Well, my motion was for 8, 9, and 10, so I guess I'll make a motion to table item number 11 also.
I'll second the amended motion.
By Andre, all those in favor, Andre?
Aye.
Martha?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Ben? I vote in the affirmative. Motion carries.
Is there anybody on our list of callers that are online that has anything? No? Molly, you got anything?
There's no agenda item for that. Next week we'll have a meeting. We can have a meeting on Monday or Wednesday.
We've been having them on Wednesday. I'm fine with Wednesdays.
That's the easiest way to go. Yeah. Anyone have any problem with that?
I mean, I think the problem with Monday sometimes is, it's right off the weekend and you
Yeah.
don't really have time to do the research and
All right.
except for budget hearings, because, Amy does such a wonderful job at doing that for us. So, all right.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Andre seconds it. All's in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.